Recently, I happened upon, um, I believe it was an advertisement, actually. It was Henry Louis Gates Jr. interviewing the actress Scarlett Johansson about her ancestry. And this was for the PBS series called Finding Your Roots. Maybe you saw it too. In the episode, Scarlett Johansson learned that her great grandfather left Poland in 1910 and came to New York. And she wondered aloud about the driving force behind that journey. It was, she surmised, just the promise of some opportunity and the faith that you're going to make it on the other side. She also learned that great grandfather's brother Moishe remained in Poland, where he and many of his children perished in the Warsaw Ghetto in the 1940s. And so Gates and Johansson each wondered aloud what it must have been like to be loaded into trains like cattle, not knowing where you're going. And I found myself as I was watching this, uh, thinking about Henry Louis Gates Jr., a man of color, and his own ancestors and how they were treated. It must have been hell, Johansson said. Gates summarized the whole thing this way. He said, retrieving lost stories can be an act of restoration, not only of our ancestors' resilience, but of the resilience of the entire human community. In today's gospel, Jesus learns that his cousin John has been delivered into the hands of his accusers. And he must suspect that this will not go well. So what Jesus does is he withdraws to ponder this. He's thinking about this and he reflects upon the stories of his ancestors and how they walked in darkness, but nevertheless embodied the light. On those dwelling in a land overshadowed by death, light has risen, the gospel says. So by retrieving a story from the past, Jesus fashions for himself and for us a word of hope about the present and the future and all time. And then he proceeds, having pondered this, having looked to the past, he proceeds then to speak to us and every other generation that the way out of death and darkness is for all humankind to do this thing that he preaches about, and that is to repent. To repent, to change your mind, to change the ways of the world for the better, heartily to amend with abhorrence is the footnote of one's past sins and walk in the light. This is a message that he's giving to the world. So he retrieves from the story not only resilience of his people, but also a message about how to proceed into the future. He remembered that he not only inherited resilience to dwell in a land overshadowed by death and darkness, but also that he inherited a legacy from his Jewish ancestors to see the light and be the light. And he preached, "Oh, beloved humankind, creation of God, creatures of God, heartily amend these ways of oppression and injustice and walk forward into the light." The story that Jesus ponders the story that he ponders in the gospel is the story that we read is our first reading. And in that reading, the people were hurting in Zebulun and Naphtali because they dwelt in a cruel world, embattled by the Assyrians. And Isaiah does the same thing. He offers the promise of light by reminding those people of their history of resilience and of resistance. He refers to their ancestor Moses, who fled to Midian and thereby escaped. See, you remember that in the first reading it says, as on the day of Midian, because Moses fled to Midian and escaped Pharaoh's cruelty and then went on in his lifetime of resistance. By retrieving a story of the past, Isaiah fashioned a word of hope for the present and a way to move forward into the light. Sometimes when I, in my work as a chaplain in a hospital, see a patient who is struggling, I ask them, what's gotten them through difficult times in the past? And they begin talking about what's gotten them through as a way to fashion a word of hope and see their way forward into the future. We live in a world today that is plagued by many forms of darkness: racism, climate change, mass incarceration, sexism, terrible injustice against our LGBTQ friends. And we too look to the stories for both of those reasons, to remember our history of resilience and also to resist and amend the ways of oppression and injustice and walk forward into the light. I invite all of us to look for ourselves into our own past and share with one another how looking into our own past helps us find moments of resistance and resilience. Those are my reflections on today's readings, and as is the custom in this community, all are welcome to share.